Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Scene at Hartwell Tavern. My name is Sharon Bernston, and this is not Hartwell Tavern, in case you hadn't noticed. It is my home. I am here today to talk about food preservation in the 18th century. 18th century food was seasonal. You could get it when it was in season, and otherwise pretty much not. So if you wanted to have a variety of foods all year round, a skilled housewife or tavern mistress had methods for preserving foods so that out of season they would be present in some form. You could get a taste of them even though they weren't fresh. They had a surprising number of methods of preserving food in the 18th century. I'm going to just read you these lists because I will never remember all these things if I tried to memorize them. And this information is derived from some of the more common 18th century cookbooks that we know were in use in North America. Methods for preserving food that were used included smoking, salting, pickling, brining, preserving in sugar, preserving in alcohol, and a primitive kind of proto-form of hot pack canning. Today in particular, I'm going to focus on fruit preservation because it is such a huge topic all by itself. The methods for preserving fruit included, and this is all from the cookbooks like Smith and Anna Glass that are over there. Jams, jellies, preserves, marmalades, syrups, wine, candied fruit, dried fruit paste, pickles, and chutney. And among I think this is a fairly exhaustive list of the fruits that are preserved as per those recipes are apricots, cherries, mulberries, gooseberries, currants, raspberries, strawberries, grapes, plums, pineapples, cantaloupe, oranges, lemons, peaches, pears, apples, and quince. What's not on this list is blackberries and blueberries, even though they were present in both England and in America. And what's also not on this list is cranberries. The first recipe for cranberries is in Amelia Simmons' 1796, the American Cookbook, which is also the first documented recipe for pumpkin. But a little after our time here. Fruit was mostly preserved in sugar, and that required specific proportions, which they did not by volume, but by weight, using one of these. This is a steel yard. It is a balance beam. You put your fruit in this end, and then you slide this along the steel arm here until you find a place where it balances, and then from the hatch marks you can read off what the weight is. And then you would do exactly the same thing for your sugar. It's cumbersome, but it's what they had. The jams and jellies, which is mostly what was made with all that sugar, were preserved in the usual ways. It's your typical jam recipe that you might find today. Equal parts sugar and fruit. Boil it until it gels, and put it up in pots. When it comes to storage, however, they did not understand the role of microorganisms in disease or in contamination. So they did what worked. They didn't understand why it worked, and we're going to come to that in a minute. The jam or the jelly or the preserves would go into a container like this. They came in different sizes. These are called galley pots. The preserve would be put into the container hot, and then a paper circle like this would be soaked in brandy and laid right down on the surface of the hot jam. And then a paper dust cover like this would be put over on top of it, tied with string, and if you're smart, you'll label it. You will also notice that the galley pots have a thickened rim called a string rim, specifically designed to hold that string in place when the preserves are put up. Does this work? Yes. Here is an example of a preserve that I made 4 years ago. I think it's strawberry rhubarb rather. And I don't know if you can see it from where you are, but right there is the surface of the brandy paper, and it's 4 years later, and it's clean. It's totally clean. Okay, so how does this work? They didn't know, and so I'm going to make a guess. This is how I think it works. The jam goes into the pot hot, so it's been sterilized by the heat. The paper soaked in brandy, the brandy sterilizes the paper and goes down on the surface of the jam and sterilizes the top surface of the jam, so no microorganisms will live on it, and then the brandy paper stays there so that it prevents any microorganisms from getting onto the jam going forward. And then the dust cover that goes over it acts as a second barrier to airborne contaminants and keeps the whole thing clean. Does it work? Yes. If you're dealing with other kinds of fruit, like whole fruit, like brandied cherries, you have a thing like this. This is a brandied cherry bottle. It has, as you can see, a larger aperture, big enough to take whole small fruits like cherries, so that you can preserve them in brandy. For dried and candied fruits, you have tins. And for dried things, you can also put them up in tins and boxes. Salt or vinegar, however, different kinds of pickles present a problem, because the salt and the vinegar will leach through redware glazes. It will leach through the tins. It's the only thing that you can put those up in are salt-glazed stoneware, which has an impervious glaze. And so a pickle or a salted or a vinegared thing would go into a stoneware crock or a bottle like that, and would be sealed with a pig's bladder or with a thing like this. This is cere cloth. It is a piece of linen soaked, impregnated with beeswax, and if you heat it gently, you can put it down over the crock, and while it's still warm and pliable, give it a good airtight seal, and it will stay. Once you have got your preserves put up, ready to store, then the question remains is, where do you store them? You need to be able to put them in a place that is rodent-free. And so that's where people have jelly cupboards or pie safes, or even a lower half of a kitchen dresser that has doors that you can shut to keep the mice out. And there you have it. So if you want strawberry jam in the middle of winter, or a nice orange marmalade glaze on your Christmas ham, that's how you get it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed.